Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my chessrealm YouTube channel. So we are still at the European Championship, an interesting game from the 7th round between Alexander Areshchenko and Pawel. Let's see what happened. Alexander Areshchenko had white pieces and he started with e4, e6, d4, d5, knight to c3, d pawn captures on v4, and we have a Rubinstein variation of French defense. White recaptures with knight goes to d7, bishop to d3, and now black plays knight from g goes to f6. White continues the development with knight to f3, and now c5, black strikes the center. Now the theory suggests that white should capture this knight on f6, and this is what happened in the game. Knight captures on f6, knight recaptures, and of course if white captures pawn on c5, black only develops, so white plays bishop to d3, double attack on pawn on c5. Black responds with queen to c7, double defending, and now white has decided to keep the tension and played queen to e2, leaving chances to either castle king or queen side, and also waiting for a black next move. So black plays bishop to e7. Now since black has already played with his dark square bishop, now white can capture on c5, so d pawn captures on c5. If black recaptures, of course black played with his dark square bishop twice, so here black lost a tempo, but before recapturing, black castles king side. Now there's no point in defending this pawn on c5 with, let's say, a b4, because after b6 this pawn is 3 times attack and cannot be more defended. And of course if c pawn captures on b6, we have queen to c3 forking both king and the rook. Well, in the game, white indeed tries to prevent this capturing pawn on c5. Bishop to d4 was played. Of course, white is thinking, if you capture my pawn on c5, bishop captures on f6. They're in double pawns along the f file, but black doesn't care. Bishop captures on c5, and now bishop recaptures on f6, and g-pawn, of course, recaptures on f6. Now let's see where we are. The material is equal. Black has a bishop pair, but has a 3-pawn island, and of course, a pawn structure around his king is not the best actually, but that's not so tragic at the moment. Well, white will definitely try to use this in the future, but first white takes care for his king safeties and castles queen side. And now black responds with b6, very interesting move, opening this long diagonal, and white immediately takes the opportunity. Queen to e4 was played. First of all, threatening with queen to h7 with checkmate, and also threatening to capture defenseless rook on a8. Well, mate on h7 is a pretty serious threat, so black has no other option but to play f5, and this rook on a8 is still hanging. Well, let's see if white can grab it. If queen captures rook on a8, then black simply responds with the bishop to b7, trapping the queen here on a8. Of course, queen can either capture rook or pawn on a7. Well, let's see. If queen captures rook, king simply recaptures, and white has 2 rooks for a queen. In some position this is enough, or maybe even better, but not in this, because black still has this bishop pair. Lots of pawns are going to be captured, so here black is definitely better. If maybe it would be better if white would still try with capturing additional pawn on a7. Of course, then b5 would be followed. Queen again is under attack and cannot go anywhere. So white can only sacrifice queen for either of the 2 bishop. Let's say queen goes to b7, queen recaptures. Well, now white only has a rook and a piece. Well, additional pawn. Still in this position, black is definitely better and would probably dominate the game. So in the game, white doesn't capture rook. Instead, white played queen to h4, preparing to try to harass the king on the here on the dark squares. Of course, this is very unpleasant, so black should immediately counteract on these weak dark squares. Maybe queen to e7, trying to exchange queen, would definitely be a good option, but instead black intends to challenge white king with bishop to e7, attacking the queen. Queen goes to h6. Well, at some point, white will definitely try with the g4, trying to exchange pawn, creating open g file for his rook. Or maybe in this position, black would have simply tried with king to h8, clearing this g8 square for his rook. Now knight to g5, trying to checkmate here on h7 doesn't work because of queen to f4, forking both king, and here white loses a piece. Here, even if white tries with the g4, trying to open f5, black simply plays rook to g8. Even if white captures, then e pawn recaptures, bishop here is blocked. Black could later try with bishop to g5, rook to h6, trying to drive this queen away, so here black is totally fine. In the game, black saw the things a little differently. Bishop to d6 was played, threatening with bishop to f4, forking both king and the queen, so of course white has no other option but to retreat the king, so king goes to b1, but believe it or not, with this bishop to d6, black lost an important tempo. Bishop cannot simply go back because then we have this g4 with a very unpleasant attack. Instead, black plays bishop to f4, attacking the queen. Queen goes to h5, and now s6. First of all, protecting pawn on h7, also with the intention of queen to f7, trying to trade the queens. And now in this position, white plays g4. Now black cannot simply recapture here on g4 because then we have first of all bishop to h7 check. After, let's say, queen recaptures, we have a queen to g4 double attack on king and the bishop. Even after bishop to g5, then white simply captures here with a knight. Black can of course recapture the pawn and still a bishop up, but after a queen to g5 check, even if a black defends the check, we have queen to h4 threatening with the unpleasant rook to g1, deadly attack on the king. King is left in the open. There are lots of ways to finish the black king here. But even if black could try with the queen to g6, now white cannot remove this knight because queen is under attack. After that we have queen to f3 attacking rook on a8, and if here black has to give up on his bishop. After bishop to b7, queen captures. Now queen cannot capture knight because of rook to g1. After f pawn recaptures, white is a pawn up, and black's king position is very bad, so here white is definitely winning. Okay, so let's go back to our game. In the game, black of course doesn't capture. Queen to f7 was played, trying to trade the most dangerous piece of the queen, so white doesn't go for it. Queen to h3 was played. This pawn on f5 is 3 times attacked. There's no point in defending with either queen to d7 because once this bishop is gone, queen is under attack. Also queen to g7 is not advisable because of rook to g1. So in the game, black plays e5, and now of course white captures on f5. Maybe in this position black would still could try with the king to h8, later with rook to g8, somehow to fortify his position, but instead black plays bishop to b7, attacking this knight on f3, also targeting this rook, but white is on the move. Rook from h goes to g1 check, king goes to h8, and now knight goes to h4, preparing deadly attack here on g6. Well, let's see, black plays a random move. We have a knight to g6 check, pawn cannot recapture because it's pinned. And after king goes, let's say, to, I don't know, g8, then simply knight to f4, discover attack, and white is a piece up, and he is definitely winning. So in the game, black plays queen to h5. Now knight to g6 doesn't work because then black simply recaptures with h pawn, and now there is no check, and this queen is protected. But here in this position, white tries with a spectacular deflection. Bishop to e2 was played, attacking the queen. Now let's see. If queen captures bishop on e2, then we have a knight to g6 check. Of course, king can go to g7 or g8. Let's see, if king goes to g7, we have rook to d7, immediate check. King goes somewhere back, then we have a mate here on h7. If, for example, rook to f7, rook captures, king captures, queen to h7 check, king to e8 is the only move, and queen to e7 is checkmate. If, however, king would go to g8, then of course we have a knight to f4, discover attack. If king goes to f7, we have queen to h7, and we have mate in the next move. If, however, king goes to h8, we have a rook to d7. It's going to be mate sooner or later. There's literally nothing black can do about it. So in the game, black plays queen to h6. Of course, again, knight to g6 doesn't work because black simply recaptured, and this queen on h6 is protected. But white is definitely better and is winning. The easiest way to convert this advantage into victory would be for white to play rook to g6, trapping the queen. Queen cannot go anywhere. And if, for example, h pawn captures on g6, we have knight to g6 check. If black doesn't want to lose additional material and sacrifice his queen, then king has two options, either g7 or g8. Let's say if king goes to g8, we have queen to b3 check. Now if king goes to g7, we have rook to d7 is going to be mate in the next move. If, however, black blows the check with rook to f7, we have rook to d7. Now rook on f7 is pinned. It's twice attacked. After, let's say, queen defends with queen to g7, rook simply captures on f7. Rook cannot help on f8 because it's attacked by the knight, and after bishop to c4, white gains decisive material advantage. And if, for example, after king to g7, we will have rook to d7 check immediately. After black, let's say, defends the check with rook to f7, we have simply queen to d3, very simple move, threatening with rook to f7, later with queen to d7. Rook to d7 doesn't help. After queen to d7 check, king can only go to g8, and after bishop to c4, of course, black can delay the mate for one move, but this is end for black. Okay, so in the game, white saw the things a little differently. Rook to g4 was played. Again, threatening with knight to g6. If, let's say, black makes a random move, knight to g6 check. After h pawn captures on gc, we have a rook to h4, and there goes our queen. So in the game now, black finally plays rook to g8. But white doesn't mind. Knight goes to g6, it's check. Well, of course, king cannot go to g7 because after rook to d7, it's checkmate. And of course, if pawn captures, we have a rook to h4 check. Now, queen capture doesn't help. After queen captures check, king to g7, after rook to d7, king to f8, and after queen to f6 is going to be checkmate in the next move. So in the game, black captures the knight with the rook, and now white simply recaptures rook with the f pawn. You can see that queen on f3 is not protected, but white threatens with g7, this deadly attack on the king. Well, even if a queen would go to g7, first white would play rook to g1, protecting this d7 square, threatening with rook to d7, deadly attack on the 7th rank. Even if black tries to prevent by bishop to c6, we have queen to d6 attacking the bishop on c6. Even if black removes the bishop, let's say, to a4, then we simply have g-pawn captures on h7, attacking the queen. Well, let's see. Queen goes somewhere along the 7th rank. We have simply queen to g8. After rook recaptures, white recaptures with promotes to queen, and it's checkmate. And if, for example, queen captures on h7, we have queen to f6, and after queen to g7, the only move, we have mate on g7. In the game, black has decided to capture queen on h3, and now we have mate in 3 moves. I'm sure we will be able to find it. White played g7 check, king to g8 was the only option, and now bishop to c4 check. Black has decided to play all the way, so bishop to d5 was played, and after bishop captures on d5, it was checkmate. So I hope you like this game, I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.